Demure.
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 Damn, I'm speaking my mind too much.
All right, welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. My name is Andy, the world's greatest podcast host. This is episode 37, if I'm not mistaken. This week is kind of a special week because we have a guest host with us this week. So let me introduce you all to our guest host first, which I'll pass the mic off to him first for a brief, maybe 15 to 30-second intro for people who are new.
Hi, how's it going? My name's Sunil. I actually met Andy just a couple months ago when we were at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, and we had a lot of great conversations about that. Currently, I'm involved in investing myself. Formerly, I used to work in the federal government, and now I do a lot of private portfolio management, and I'm also trying to get involved in the Bitcoin industry, but still early days there. So nothing to really announce or talk about, but except for that, it's more on the investing side, and I want to get someone involved in the mining side of things.
One of you, Dom, Tristan.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were gonna cue it into nonetheless, what's going on, guys? Dominic here once again. So with that being said, I hope you guys continue to watch our videos. So leave a like, comments, and subscribe to this channel as well as our clips channel. And let's get the ball rolling. Sorry, caught up.
Yeah, no, you guys were like so shocked by Sunil's intro that you guys all forgot what you were supposed to say. Tristan, you go.
Hey guys, Tristan here. We've got a great show for you today, as always. And I welcome Sunil to the show. I'll send it back to Andy to take it away.
Brief note before we begin. I know this is your first time here, Sunil, and it's a casual environment. Don't feel pressured. So how I would maybe introduce this crowd, because I know this is your first time meeting Dom and Tristan virtually, I guess. But the vibe of this show is sort of I'm not sure if any of you, including our audience members, watch the All In podcast. I'm sure that's another podcast that a lot of people watch. So now that we have 4 people, it's kind of like an analogous foil to the All In podcast. So if you guys have been watching, and by you guys I mean the audience, I've been watching this show for a while. It's probably each one of our hosts is related to one of the, not actually related, but personality wise related to one of the All In podcast hosts. And I'm probably the David Sachs of the token right winger, I guess you can say. And then Tristan is the JCal, Jason Calacanis, the token left winger. Dom is the token David Freeberg, who is just doesn't give a shit about politics and just wants to talk about science. And then I guess we have an analogous person to Chamath now with Sunil joining the show. So this is just kind of the rough vibes that I'm getting. I'm not sure if you guys will agree with that assessment, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But just to jump into today's actual topics, our first topic of the day, we always, as a tradition on this show, like to start off with some Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining news, if there is any. And this week, we did get our Bitfarms operational update. So full disclosure, I am a shareholder in Bitfarms, and I believe quite a few of our hosts on this show are as well. So this is a company which we all pay attention to very closely. So Bitfarms put out their September operational update, and there's a couple of pieces of good news and maybe a couple of pieces of bad news as well. So first of all, their energized hash rate remained at 11.3 exahash per second, which is the same as August. So unfortunately, they did not improve upon that. And their operating hash rate is still at 10.3 exahash per second. So maybe that's kind of a thing that we can talk about. Is that concerning that they're trying to get to 21 exahash per second by the end of the year, by the way. So, are they going to be able to hit that? That's kind of a like a point of concern that we can talk about. But their Bitcoin HODL did increase. So they increased their Bitcoin HODL position to 1,147 Bitcoin. Plus, I think they added to their synthetic HODL as well, which, if you guys don't know what that is, they're buying call options, long dated call options to kind of free up more capital and get more leverage on Bitcoin. So it's kind of like hodling, but instead of hodling Bitcoin, they're hodling call options. So there's that. And then they did reach their 21 joules per terahash efficiency goal, which they originally said they were going to aim for the end of the year, but they reached that early. So we're in early October now, and then they reached that about 3 months early. So that's pretty good news. And remember, with the efficiency, you want the number to be low, right? The lower, the better. They're using less energy per terahash of hash rate that they're putting out. So that's kind of how it works, right? So 21 is relatively low, right? So I've seen like other companies trying to get below 20, but yeah, like low 20s is pretty good if I do say so myself. And also that deal that they announced with Stronghold. So they're acquiring Stronghold, but before that deal closes, they also announced an agreement to host some of the Bitcoin miners that they were going to place in their Paraguay site as Stronghold's Pennsylvania site instead. So they're going to be able to add an additional 2.2 exahash per second in the coming weeks. And I believe they said early October, so early to mid-October. So yeah, within the next week or two, they should be able to bring that online. And lastly, this one was the most underrated update of the whole report, in my opinion, which was that they had the dispute with the former CEO who sued them for breach of contract and got kicked out of the company. So all of that was really messy. But they did announce that the employment dispute with the former CEO has now been settled out of court. So we don't know exactly what the details are and how much they actually had to pay the former CEO. I think the old CEO was suing them for like $27 million or something. It was quite a large amount, but I'm not sure if they, actually paid him the 27 million or they came to a compromise and paid him less. That part was not announced. They just announced that dispute is settled and is over. So at least there's that, right? So that's all the updates. And then there's a chart that just kind of illustrates the progression of Bitfarms. So they did earn 217 Bitcoin in September, which is down from 233 in August. But keep in mind that the hash rate, the hash difficulty did go up between September and August. So, assuming that because they didn't increase their operational hash rate at all between August and September, logically they would mine a little bit less just because the difficulty went up. So yeah, anyways, there's that chart. And that's the update. And right now I do want to pass it off to one of you guys, whoever wants to take the floor. What do you think of this update? Do you find this update to be acceptable? Is it good or bad? How are you feeling? If you're a Bitfarms shareholder, how are you feeling about the company? Because I know like Bitcoin miners in general and Bitfarms, the stock hasn't been doing well recently. So does this report make you more concerned, less concerned, or just about the same amount of concern and it doesn't really impact your opinion at all? So whoever wants to take it first. I know Tristan's probably dying to speak because he is our in-house resident mining expert. So maybe I'll pass it to Tristan first.
So I think that this was a pretty mid update. It's not anything special. I think the main thing is that the FUD with the CEO has been settled. And that they've gotten more efficient. But beyond that, I think the fact that there hasn't been the additional hash rate added on yet, I think that it's not looking super duper likely that they're going to hit the 20 exahash. I feel like I'm starting to lean more towards they'll undershoot it by a little bit, rather than they're actually going to hit it, because they are a good 10 exahash off from their target, and that's still almost a double in total. And I think based on their slight delay with the sending stuff to Paraguay, maybe that site is taking a little bit longer to get set up than they are expecting, in which case it seems that they may be slower to load up their the miners there. It's possible though that there is, since there has been some shipping issues, etc., in the States, for example, that this may be impacting their ability to receive the miners, which could be an additional factor. But I think overall, I don't think that this is looking like a bad scenario. It's just kind of like we're kind of waiting for them to really make more of a move in this scenario, right? Because we're waiting for that stronghold hosting deal to kick in, and then we're also waiting for any news on the Paraguay or additional stronghold hosting. Like we're at this point, we're in a bit of a weird spot, because it's possible that they could go really hard and get a whole bunch of stuff really quickly and manage to hit that target. But I think that we're running out of time for them to really charge towards it. And it could be possible that they're going to go with a lower installed hash rate, a higher installed hash rate, but not have it energized, so that they can be like, oh, we hit the target, but also, they kind of didn't, because it's not actually energized. It could be just that they're racking them up. So we'll have to see how this pans out. I think that I'm still bullish on the stock. I'm still bullish on the company, but I think we're kind of waiting on them to do something here. And I think that the stock is not going to go up without Bitcoin moving itself at this point. I don't think that Bitfarms news itself is going to be moving it unless they announce like a major addition to their process.
Right. To give it a letter grade, what would you give it?
It's like a B-. It's fine. I guess yeah, it'd be like a 70, flat on a 70. It's perfectly fine. I would have expected it to be more, but I'm not dissatisfied, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And just not to try and make excuses for Bitfarms. I think part of the reason why they did kind of maybe underperform their hash rate growth expectations was because they had a bad batch of their miners that they got shipped from Bitmain, I think is the manufacturer. One of the, a batch of the whole, like a whole batch of the miners, they had a chip that was faulty. It was overheating or something. So they had to send it back, and then they had to get a new batch. So that was like, there's no way they could have predicted that, right? And usually Bitmain is really good at quality control, but they just got unlucky. So unfortunately, that was a thing that I think did delay them. And if they don't hit their 21 exahash goal by the end of the year, I would say that that's probably going to be a big contributing factor. And like you said, Tristan, maybe they'll just like put them in and then not have them operational and say that they technically hit their target. Is like the politician's answer, right? It's like if you ask Kamala Harris what she's going to do for inflation, like that's kind of like, a non-answer, right? Just we put them in, but it's not operational, but we kept our promise, right? So that would be unfortunately not the greatest outcome, but yeah, I mean, if that happens, then it's whatever. I still think that Bitfarms has a lot of potential, and I'm still bullish on the stock myself. And I'll be a little bit more generous than Tristan. Maybe I'll give it just a B, not a B-. And the only reason why it's not a B- but a B is because of that last point. The dispute with the CEO has been settled. So I think that gives them a little bit of a boost in my eyes, just because of that, which is totally not related to their like, core operations, I guess you can say, but it's nevertheless good news. So I would up it to a B just for that. But yeah, it's a B. It's not anything super special for me. And yeah, unfortunately, Bitfarms has not had an A report in a long time. So yeah, they better up their game in future months. But we'll have to see. Yeah, any of the other guys, do you want to add your thoughts and comments? Yes, Dom.
Yeah, sure. So I'll probably be like short and sweet and stuff. I think I'll start with the grade. I also do agree. I think it's probably like around the B grade. This is like a decent report, nothing too special about it. And my logic is any of the issues that they're actually experiencing as of this moment right now, if the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates supposedly like meeting per meeting, and the Bank of Canada is cutting interest rates too as well. Like companies like Bitfarms are going to have more access to money, and with access to more money and cheaper prices for those access to money, they could probably hire out better, increase their technology, and then make processes better. So I think over time, the company will inevitably do a lot better, and it'll show, I'm sure, in like the next few months following. And I was gonna ask you a question, Andy. So like total Bitcoin earned 217. The difficulty of Bitcoin being earned, does that have something to do with like the Bitcoin halving, or is it just like their side having issues specifically?
Yeah, so the Bitcoin has a automatic difficulty adjustment mechanism is built into the protocol itself. In essence, how it works is that it tries to ensure that each block takes 10 minutes to mine, right? So on average, it's not like 10 minutes on the dot, but some blocks might take 12 minutes, but some might take 8 minutes, but it should in general balance out to 10 minutes, right? But sometimes when a lot of miners get plugged in, and miners could get plugged in because all these companies are trying to expand, then that increases the total hash rate of the networks because more people are trying to mine. But then that speeds up the block time because like there's just more calculations being done, right? So the protocol has to make the question, like the SHA-256 algorithm, harder to do. It increases the difficulty of the question so that you can return to a 10-minute block time, right? So that's the reason why their operational hash rate stayed the same as August, but their total Bitcoin earned went down. It's because there's just more machines being plugged in, and there's more hash rate being thrown into the network in general. So, yeah, does that answer your question, Dom?
Yeah, a little bit. That was a lot easier. But otherwise, I'm all set to go for the next person. So
Yeah, no, Sunil, you want to impart your opinions?
Sure. Admittedly, I'm not an expert in the industrial mining space. I don't necessarily follow all the miners, but I have been learning a lot from you guys the last few weeks as I've been watching the show. And it's just not my strategy around Bitcoin, but I've always I'm happy to learn about it. The only thing I can really say substantive about it is that this is a difficult time for the mining industry because since the halving, so their revenues have been cut in half, and Bitcoin is struggling in the post halving, and with the geopolitical liquidity cycles and everything, we're not at all time highs. We're not necessarily at a low. It's at a healthy price, in my opinion, but as we can see, that like the issues around the halving is starting to weigh on Bitcoin miners. So, and this is usually like when you see capitulation in the market is usually right before Bitcoin starts to rise again. So that's positive from my perspective. I'm not betting against any miner or anything like that. Also, the only thing, an issue, like an area in mining that's always been kind of a passion of mine is mining centralization, especially the centralization of the manufacturing of the ASICs. And what you said about the problem with their new batch of miners is just kind of validates a lot of my own viewpoints that like we're relying on 2 mega miners. This is the problem with monopolistic markets, so we need a lot more competition here. So I'm very, very excited about the future of Bitcoin mining ASICs. With Block has now gotten involved, and they want to start to provide open source mining hardware to new companies. So I think that's positive. And personally, I've been actually focusing on BitX, which is a small miner that you can mine at home that allows you to compete with these bigger miners. It allows for home miners to get access, and it's very easy to scale at home. So I just kind of commentary off on the side. I'm not an expert at the company though, so I'm not exactly sure if it's a B. I guess it's as expected because we're in the middle of a hash rate, a low hash rate cycle. Oh, sorry, a higher hash rate, but a post halving cycle.
Yeah, no, what you brought up with mining centralization, I think that's also an important topic that we'll maybe have to pick up another day, just because we don't have an unlimited amount of time. But maybe just right before we move on to the next story, let me just maybe explain a little bit of the method behind my madness. Or it's not my madness, it's our madness at this point, because we're all shareholders of Bitcoin mining companies on this show. Except for you, maybe Sunil, but like the rest of our the crew. So I think I've explained this in the past, but just in case this is our audience members, one of our audience members' first time watching the show, basically the principle is that why we should be in miners instead of Bitcoin is because I think miners represent a leverage play on the Bitcoin space. And where does the kind of leverage come from? Well, it all comes from the fact that the electricity cost to mine Bitcoin doesn't go up as fast as the Bitcoin price itself during a bull cycle. So, for example, if you're a Bitcoin miner and you're able to mine Bitcoin for $50,000 per Bitcoin, let's just say, right? And Bitcoin's price is $60,000 per Bitcoin right now. So you're making $10,000 per Bitcoin because like you're the only one who can effectively buy Bitcoin at $50,000, right? Because if you're not a miner, then you go to the open market, you're going to have to pay that $60,000 market price. But if you're a miner, then you're paying that $50,000 sticker price for the electricity, and then you get Bitcoin in return. And also, this effect is just exacerbated when the Bitcoin price goes up. Like if it goes on a bull run, let's say if it hits 100K and your electricity costs, it'll go up a little bit just because more miners plug in and there's more competition and stuff. So you're gonna use a little bit more electricity in general. So maybe your electricity cost goes up to $60,000 per Bitcoin now, but Bitcoin is 100K, so you're making $40,000 per Bitcoin now when you're a Bitcoin miner. So the point is the electricity cost that you're going to spend to mine Bitcoin goes up slower than the Bitcoin price itself. So that's kind of where the leverage comes from. And that's why, for me at least, I see Bitcoin miners as such a great opportunity to kind of play the Bitcoin bull market and potentially get even greater gains compared to holding Bitcoin itself. Of course, there's nothing wrong with holding Bitcoin itself. I also hold actual Bitcoin itself, right, unleveraged. But I just think that Bitcoin miners is it exploits that principle of that like Bitcoin bull run, the 4-year cycle, and you can potentially gain more money by being in Bitcoin mining stocks as opposed to Bitcoin itself. So that's just kind of a brief, 2-minute, 3-minute explainer of how this stuff works. So yeah, that's all for that story. If you guys don't have anything else to add,
I also have something to jump in here regarding the miners value proposition. And I think one area that you didn't really touch on is the fact that they can periodically decouple with the price of Bitcoin when there is at times where the miners are down more than they should be compared to Bitcoin. So you can kind of get and at the same time, there are times when they're up more than Bitcoin. So you can kind of take advantage of that difference in price where there's maybe more fear in the mining space, but you don't have necessarily as much to fear because Bitcoin's price is high. So Bitcoin's high, the miners will still make money, right? And so there's kind of a little bit of space there where you can actually swing trade these Bitcoin miners surprisingly well as well. Not that I personally do that a whole ton, but there's been multiple instances where the Bitcoin miners have gone down significantly more than than Bitcoin itself. So you could get them at a cheaper price, and then when they realign with the Bitcoin price, then you're able to gain a much greater percentage gain because of that kind of price inefficiency is really what it comes down to. So that's one thing with how we're kind of like using the miners as a investment strategy. Not financial advice, obviously, but it's kind of like that method that means that there will be times when you're looking at the Bitcoin price and going, why are the miners down? And then other times where the miners are skyrocketing, yet Bitcoin has done basically nothing. And part of that is because because they're actually companies, people tend to be more forward looking. So when Bitcoin starts running, the miners tend to start running more because people are expecting the returns at a later date than right now. So that's kind of like another area where there's kind of a multiple that can be added to it. So it's definitely a very volatile asset, even more volatile than I would say Bitcoin is, but they have a lot of potential. And I think another area just on that front is that there have been some times where since a lot of these mining companies have Bitcoin hodls, where the market has valued the companies at basically zero or less than zero of their market cap minus the hodl. I remember in December 2022, Hut 8, the mining company, this market cap was lower than the total hodl position, which meant that functionally speaking, their company was being valued at $0 and their hodl was being valued at like minus 30 million because it was under that. So there's been instances where there's been a big price inefficiency on that front, which make them a more compelling option at times.
Maybe it's a little bit less so with ETFs now being a thing in both Canada and the United States. But, if you wanted to gain exposure to Bitcoin back in the day, there was really not a way to do it when, like, if ETFs weren't a thing besides getting into the miners, right? So I think that might be another factor. And even with the ETFs now, like, does that invalidate that part? I don't think so. Maybe a little bit, but I still think that there's room in the market for these, like, Bitcoin proxy plays. And with regards to the Bitcoin hodl, I think that's maybe something that is also interesting, where if you're a Bitcoin miner, you build up a large hodl bag, and the management of the Bitcoin company, if they're smart, maybe they'll, I know they say not to try and time the market, not to try and time Bitcoin, but with the 4-year cycle being such a, standout thing that has happened throughout history, maybe if you're a Bitcoin miner that has a lot of hodl, maybe you would decide to dump a bunch of Bitcoin when the cycle is supposedly going to peak, and then all of a sudden that could give you an extra boost in terms of your market cap when the time comes, right? So at least you have that option with you. So I think there's a lot of things that Bitcoin miners can do that an ETF cannot, and that's what kind of makes me interested in this space, at least. And I feel like that scene from Gladiator, you're in the arena, right? Like that's what it feels like to be in Bitcoin miners every day. But that's just kind of the life that I signed up for. So anyways, if no one else has anything else to add, why don't we move on to the next part of the story? Yeah.
Just quickly. Well, I was just gonna say, like, also it's just a tax-free option if you haven't maxed out any of your tax-free accounts yet. So, I mean, instead of buying Bitcoin and then you get taxed off that, if you haven't maxed your accounts out yet, you can use miners as a play. Arguably, like ETFs too as well. But heck, why not go the minor route too? So okay, we can move on. We're good.
Who wants to pay taxes?
I know, right? Yeah.
All right. So here's for paying taxes and not going to jail. Let's talk about some politics news. So this is, we love talking about politics on this show. This is some red meat for everyone around here. I'm sure you guys have all watched at least the highlights. I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but you guys have probably watched at least the highlights of the vice presidential debate between Republican nominee J.D. Vance and Democratic nominee Tim Walz. Just not to like kind of poison you guys' thoughts, but let me just show you like a photo of that was taken. That was like it happened at the same time, so it's not manipulated. It's literally just like a side-by-side photo of Vance versus Walz. If you guys did not watch the debate, all you have to do is look at this photo, and it's kind of just a visual summary of how the debate goes. Again, maybe I'm a little bit slightly biased on this topic, but it's kind of accurate in my opinion. But maybe we'll talk about that. Maybe you guys would disagree, right? So let me just kind of maybe summarize what the end result was, right? So after the debate happened, CNN did a poll as to who won the debate, right? So if you guys recall, Kamala Harris, she's the current vice president, and she did attend her VP debate back in 2020 against Mike Pence, who was the vice president at the time. And after the debate between Harris and Pence, it was the CNN poll rated 59% of the people that were polled decided that Harris won, and then only 38% said that Pence won. However, in 2024, it was much more of an even split with a slight edge to J.D. Vance, with 51% of people saying that Vance won, and then 49% saying that Walz won. So keep in mind, this is CNN, right? It's a very left-leaning publication. So maybe you can say that the people who watch CNN are probably left-leaning people in general, to say the least, right? So the fact that they, like the majority of them thought that Vance won, maybe that goes to show that Vance outperformed expectations, or maybe Walz underperformed expectations, or maybe it's a combination of both those factors. But before I jump in to later parts of this story, let me just first get you guys' reactions, right? As I said, I'm sure you guys watched at least the highlights. What did you guys think about the debate in general? And did your opinions of any of these, either of these two candidates, change after watching the debate? Why or why not?
I thought that both people did pretty well. They were really nice to each other the entire time, but I felt like Vance kind of had a slightly higher level of demure, or like aura to him that kind of like ousted him out a little more.
You did not just use the word demure.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. My point being is like, I personally felt like they were really good at delivering their points, but Vance did it a little strongly. They were giving like sympathy and kindness towards each other during like moments of weakness where they could have attacked, for example. But I feel like at the very end, I was watching like the CBC show, and they were really nice to each other. And then at a last moment, I think Vance made like a subtle attack, and then I just remember what's his face. What was his name again? Waltz just being extremely surprised and like, "Excuse me," at the like some point during the debate, and then yeah, I just found that pretty interesting overall. But yeah, no, I definitely think that Vance just had the kind of higher edge, like just in the connotation of speaking and like points delivery and things like that. I felt like Waltz was just like your uncle in the neighborhood, and then Vance was more of like the actual politician. So I could see how he took the cup there. So that's my opinions.
I think it's very telling that this debate happened and you only remembered the name of one of the debaters. Is a very clear example of how the debate went and what your true thoughts are. But maybe I'm taking words out of your mouth.
Well, to be fair, I only watched it like this morning, so yeah, no, fair play. I think you have it all right. So yeah.
All right. Now that Dom has made his opinion clear, does someone else want to impart their opinion?
Okay, one thing to remember is that in 2020, it was Kamala Harris, who's like the young, vibrant candidate versus the old person. Like Mike Pence is very much a standard neocon, like more on the Dick Cheney forever war side of the party. Vance is actually much more on the populist end, so it's much hard. I think it's much hard, and he has like kind of a new face, so it's just much harder for the Democrats to really attack him. And I also think that in this, it was reversed. Vance is a young guy. He's standing beside an old guy. That always benefits you in politics. I mean, it goes back to the old story about Nixon and Kennedy in the 1960 election. And so I thought that was definitely a factor. But the other factor being that Vance is, if you go to liberal echo chambers on the internet, Vance is often seen as a weirdo, or they push. I saw them pushing stories that they pushed a story that he had sex with a couch because he wrote it in Hillbilly Elegy. Like the Democratic attacks on him for the most part have been kind of stupid. They work for the echo chamber, but they don't necessarily work for the greater audience. And then when you see this like really articulate individual who can talk about technology, he can talk about all these topics. I thought one of the stronger parts of the debate was when he was fact checked and he like asserted himself and basically kind of proved that the fact checking was kind of inappropriate. When they fact checked him on immigration, where they said that the people in Haiti were status individuals, and Vance actually provided the context that kind of showed why the moderators weren't being fair to him. It was similar to a moment he had with Dana Bash on CNN, where she was fact checking him, kind of how he felt was inappropriate. I thought it just showed how sharp he is and how good he is on the spot. And I thought he just showed himself to be very complimentary to Trump. One of the moments in the debate where he showed himself to be a complimentary candidate was the actual abortion conversation. Now, personally, I don't necessarily agree with Trump or Vance on the abortion debate, but Trump's line on the abortion debate has been that I kind of did the country a favor because it's no longer a federal issue, and now people can discuss it at the state level and have referendums or whatever that takes. I didn't think that landed very well for Trump. It's definitely the weakest part of his campaign because he is behind. The Roe v. Wade repeal. And I thought the Vance basically articulated the same thing, but he did a good job with it. He just explained that the Democrats are kind of being fraudulent when they tell you that they're going to bring back Roe v. Wade, and that this has to happen at the state level now because the Supreme Court's ruled this. And the Democrats are making empty promises. And I think he did a good job articulating how it's up to the people now to make decisions at the state level. And I just thought he did it in a way that might actually be able to attract like centrist candidates. I don't think the Trump hit, that was probably the weakest part of Trump's debate, and it was one of the strongest parts of Vance's debate. So that's one comment, is just that I think he's just his young and the vibrancy, he brings a lot to the ticket where he just really compliments Trump's, because everybody knows Trump has some kind of, he has some weak points in his personality, which sometimes is a strong point for some voters. But when you're talking about independent and centrist voters, they're really turned off. And they're also very turned off on the abortion issue, especially young women who Trump is struggling with greatly. So I just thought those are some comments that I noticed.
Yeah, I agree with the abortion thing too, by the way, with your stance. So
my personal stance on the abortion is I'm for abortion. I don't think that it should be restricted. I also think the Democrats are being fraudulent on abortion. Like I thought a lot of people said, oh, Kamala was stronger on that abortion issue. She's lying. Like she's not going to reinstate Roe v. Wade. So is that really like a moral way to be if you're a politician? Should you tell the truth? Should the Democrats just like change their strategy around abortion so it reflects the facts of the state issue? That's kind of my own personal stance on it. If it was up to me, I'd push the red button to legalize it. But yeah,
we could maybe have like a whole show just talking about that one issue. But we don't have all the time in the world, but my second part of the question was, did your opinions of either of these two candidates change after this debate? So I'd like for you guys to answer that question. Dom, since you answered the original question first, let me pass it to you. Did your opinion of either of these two candidates change? And I'm only asking this question because, you know, the Democrats have ran a campaign on like Vance is weird or Republicans are weird, right? But what we saw last night from this debate was maybe changing, like opinion changing for some people, right? Because you had like people had like a image of Vance in their mind, and then maybe what we got was a little bit different, or do you still think Vance is weird? And what's your opinion on all of that?
Like up front, to be fair, like I only watched this one like debate, right? And if I remember correctly, I think at one point in time we talked about Waltz in a previous podcast episode, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that at front is like the only exposure I have with those two individuals. Yeah, like I previously mentioned before, I think Vance has a better taste in my mouth. Just hearing this weird stuff is like interesting for sure. This is all news to me, but I think for what it was worth, his presentation of himself was a bit better than Waltz, just because he just honestly felt like the uncle on the neighborhood corner street, and then Vance kind of felt more like a politician. But yeah, that's just what I thought. So
it did have a little bit of an influence on you, maybe.
Definitely.
Like
Definitely.
up a little bit in your books. Maybe Walls stayed the same or went down slightly. All right. Sunil, you want to give your answer to that?
Yeah, sure. I guess like I didn't. Well, Vance is very much an unknown to me. Like 3-4 months ago, I didn't even know who this guy was. So the first time I saw him speak was on the All In podcast at their conference, and that kind of changed my. I didn't have a negative or positive opinion of him, but I was actually very impressed by him. I was very impressed by how eloquent of a speaker he was, and how he was one of the few politicians I've ever seen that's able to speak about things like technology in detail, because he used to be a venture capitalist himself. And I just thought if I was surprised by anything, I honestly thought Waltz was going to do better. So I think that Vance just outplayed him. He's a better debater. He's more eloquent, and he looks better on camera.
And Tristan, as our token lefty, our token Democrat, I'm kidding, but I did promise you that I will give you an opportunity to defend Tim Walz to your heart's delight. So you have the floor for the next hour if you want, and I promise that you will have your opportunity to make your voice heard. So the same questions as before. What did you think of the debate, and did your opinion of either of these two candidates change after you watched the debate?
As the apparently the token leftist, who's not even that left, I think that I think the debate was much more enjoyable to watch than the presidential debate. Either of the presidential debates, because I feel like both people had stuff to say. Both people were polite and willing to accept that there were similarities in stances, maybe differences in approaches and opinions, but they were willing to express that this is this is an area in which, you know, they have some common ground. And I think that is something that's extremely important in politics, because what we're seeing a lot these days is people getting so separated out, polarized in their different groups. People get too far on one side or the other, and then they cannot have they can't find any common ground with the other side, and then it just turns into everyone vilifying each other, and it's kind of just it's not a good scenario, particularly for a democracy where, you know, we're trying to come together and figure out how to keep countries running. I mean, I guess this is kind of going for Canada too. Yeah, so with regards to my opinions for them before, yeah, I would say Vance and Wells are both more unknown for me, at least. I wasn't super aware of them prior to their VP announcements. And I wasn't sitting there going, wow, these are someone I followed super in depth. I've only heard them speak pretty sparingly overall. I had heard the couch rumor for Vance. Not gonna lie, that was never going to be a factor in whether or not he is someone who is eligible for the job. What people want to do in the privacy of their own home is what people want to do. You know, if he's really got to think for couches, I don't care, as long as he can. If he gets elected, he does a good job, right? So, you know, bringing it back to that, I think that bring back to the debate. I think that Vance performed better than I was expecting, and in the brief times that I'd seen Vance, he seemed a little swarmy, a little. I don't know. I don't know how to put my word on it. He just seemed very something about him seemed a little bit weird. Not like weird the way that they're talking, but like, I don't know, like kind of like a greasy salesman kind of vibe. But then on the debate, he seemed very succinct, very polite, very direct and articulate. So I think that made him appear a lot better in my mind than going into it, where I'd only really seen stuff of him in passing. It wasn't necessarily negative. It wasn't necessarily positive stuff. It was just kind of there. And so maybe some of my assessment of him was, judging a book by its cover. Not necessarily, any real thought on him himself. And, going back to the debate again, I think Walls, I was expecting to do better, because what I have seen of him from like his rallies and stuff, he seems very very charismatic at those. But then in the debate, I felt like he seemed a lot more easily flustered and a little bit more kind of like jumping around, like kind of like looking, more concerned, writing notes, etc., which, is a good practice to have in a debate. But, at the same time, I think that Vance looked really confident, and he looked like he knew what he was talking about. So I think on that front, there was an over. I feel like Vance performed significantly better than I was expecting, and Wells performed significantly worse than I was expecting, which meant that we kind of met in the middle of my where which is how I feel like we kind of got this even result, because Vance outperformed and Walls underperformed, but everyone was expecting Vance to underperform and Walls to overperform, so it just kind of evened out in the middle. So on that front, I think in terms of policies, I think that it's clear that there are policies that are better for each side. I think we've touched on the abortion one. I feel like that's the obvious one that comes to mind for the Democrats, where they clearly have a stronger position, because I would say they have the position that most people are at least moderately aligned with. Even if most people, even if there's like people with limitations that they're considering, I would say that most people are generally aligned with the sentiment that is that people should have some capacity to choose at some point, right? I think the majority of people are on board with that. I think that there's a lot of people who get really stuck in the weeds on timelines and at some point, when does a child become a child, etc. There's people who are going to get stuck on that, and I think that there is a fair argument to be made at points in that. But I think that Vance put it pretty well when he said that the Republicans don't really have people's trust on that issue. I think that's true. I don't think that they currently do. And maybe part of that is from Trump and the Roe v. Wade. I think that's probably a contributing factor. That's probably why this is such a big deal in this current election. Besides that, I don't have a ton. I feel like you're expecting me to go hard and defend someone, defend Walz or somehow, but I feel like
you thought it was a tie. That's pretty much just that I'm getting at.
Yeah, I feel like Walz did a perfectly fine job of defending himself. I don't think this is a clear victory by Vance. I just don't think that this was. I think that this was a pretty fair showing for both people. So it wasn't like there's going to be much to really attack or defend either of them, because at this point they did so well, I would say, that you really have to hammer into their individual policy points and their stances rather than nailing down on the just on them personally, or they're eating the cats kind of vibes. I think that
there's a lot, I guess, you can say about both sides, and obviously I'm biased and I'll be the first to admit it. And granted, there are issues that I actually agree more with Walz on than with Vance, right? But I think overall, if you were just to look at this debate from an objective perspective, look, when the Trump-Harris debate happened, I was willing to admit that Harris did better in that debate, right? And I think that is only fair that we should all come to the consensus that it wasn't a tie. And I think that it was actually pretty far from a tie. So I showed you that CNN poll, which, again, it's CNN, so it's a very left-leaning publication, and the people who watch CNN are generally very left-leaning people. 51% of those people found that Vance won the debate, right? So I think it's pretty clear that Vance won the debate, and we can maybe have an argument as to how much that actually matters in terms of the final result of the election. But I just think, maybe if you look at Polymarket, for instance, right? Trump's Polymarket odds went up significantly, noticeably, after the debate between Vance and Walz, and it went down significantly after the Trump-Harris debate, right? So if you want to say that Harris won the debate with Trump, but Vance won the debate with Walz, then we're back to break even. Then we're back to a tie again that way. Then I would probably agree with you on that. But I think that if you just look at this debate itself, it was pretty clear that Vance had the upper hand, and he pretty much had the upper hand the entire night. Again, that's my position. Maybe you would disagree with that, but I'm just saying, right? So if you guys look at the next picture on the docket, maybe that's another area, or there's another topic that is related to what I was talking about that we should discuss, which is, I think we discussed this in a previous episode as well, which is bias in the mainstream media. So I'm just I just shared a photo of an email that I got from the New York Times. So New York Times, I'm subscribed to the New York Times, and they send me, breaking news updates. And this is one of the emails I got from the New York Times. And I just want to read the headline first, and then I'll read you my response to the headline, and then we can maybe open up the floor for another discussion. But so the headline of this, we all saw the debate, remember, right? So this was right after we all saw the debate. I get this email, and the headline is VP debate highlights a smooth JD Vance tried to rewrite the history of the Trump presidency. Tim Walz had a rocky start, but found his voice on abortion and Jan 6. So again, this is the headline, right? And it was sent through an email to everybody, right? There's no like option that you can check. It's like check here if you're a right winger or check here if you're a left winger. Like they didn't do a questionnaire when I signed up for the New York Times. They just blasted this out to absolutely everyone that consented to emails. And here's my response to it, right? So those of you who watched the debate, you can't honestly tell me that this headline from the New York Times is not biased. I'm not asking you to endorse one side or another. I'm simply asking you to stop and evaluate bias in media and how they're trying to tip the race in favor of one side. So do you agree with my assessment that the New York Times is being super biased and they're trying to tip the race towards one side? And maybe I'm picking on the New York Times, but in my opinion, is the whole mainstream media. And like, what do you think of this headline? Do you think it's an accurate headline, or do you think that, like, clearly they're trying to interfere with the election? I don't think that's like an overstatement, right? But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty biased, to be honest. There's no way that you can't deny that at all. Yeah, to be fair, like maybe there's moments where Tim Walz maybe found himself and then like carried through whatever. But I think the overall factor is that Vance did a really good job throughout the entire debate in itself, and that speaks, volumes in general. And the way this article was written on an overall basis just seems to be, yeah, left did well, and no matter how good or bad Waltz did, like he did good, pretty much is what I'm reading right now. And I think we can all agree, regardless of like which side you support, there's no denying it. I'll say that.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the meme with like the woman in like the cubicle and then like an attractive looking guy. It's like saying something to her, and then she's like, "Oh, you're such a sweetie," and then like the gross like IT guy comes along and says something, and then it could be like the same thing or something even better, and then she's like, HR, hello, please pick up, right? So this is how I felt after, like, this is how I felt after reading this headline. This is how like the media reacts, right? It's like whatever Walz says, he's like the attractive guy, right? He's like, I'm gonna give you free abortions, I'm gonna give you like, I'm gonna improve Obamacare, give you free healthcare, give you all this, lower drug prices, give you all this stuff, and then like the woman's like, oh, you're such a sweetie. Like, it's like the media, right? The woman's like, the media, you're such a sweetie. And then like Vance is like, the gross IT guy's like, I'm gonna fix our border. And then, like, the woman's like, HR. He's talking about talking about people eating dogs. Like, call HR on him, please arrest him. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, this is the kind of vibes that I'm getting, and I'm not sure if you guys would agree to that. But someone else, please correct me if you disagree, or support me if you agree.
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, it's clearly biased. I mean, my views on a lot of legacy media, especially the New York Times, is that New York Times does the bidding for what people would call the political establishment or the institutional class. And the current political debate really, I mean, the corporate media is very, very interested in keeping this debate, left versus right debate, going. I don't really see it as real these days. I think it's very much institutionalist versus anti-institutionalist. And the New York Times is going to take the position of the institutionalist, and that's just how it's going to be. And they're unapologetic about it. And I don't even think they're trying to be accurate. It's a propaganda machine at this point. And they know that their businesses are kind of on the last days. They're just doing whatever they need to do to generate revenue. And then beyond that, like with this mainstream media bias, Tristan commented on how, like, his opinion of, I'm not accusing Tristan of reading mainstream media. I'm just saying, I think a lot of people were set up to thinking that Vance is this weirdo. There was a lot of people who were watching closely, or they didn't watch the All In podcast interview, and then they like hear the guy, and he's actually pretty eloquent. So he's set up for, like, he's just set up to be underestimated. So like he already has a huge advantage over Waltz. And the other thing is that like this is not totally related to the New York Times, but when it comes to, like, a lot of these politicians, a lot of the media just kind of assume all voters are pretty stupid, or the average voter is stupid. And like, a lot of voters might watch this debate and say, I agree with Waltz's stance on abortions, therefore he won the debate. I think that's how a lot of people do value whether a candidate won or lost the debate. And the fact is the voters, there are voters that understand the Constitution. They understand what the ruling of the Supreme Court means. Like, they are going to value their candidates not just based on just based on if they agree with them. They're going to value them based on whether they believe the candidate is being honest. So I just don't think that Waltz and Kamala Harris are being honest about abortion. They are not. There is no path to legalizing Roe v. Wade, to bringing back Roe v. Wade at the federal level. So that's just another comment. But in terms of the mainstream media, yeah, I mean, the New York Times is kind of the leader of the pack, and they are unapologetically anti-Trump and pro institutional class, which is now being represented by the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and just before I pass the mic to Tristan, you actually brought up a good point, Sunil. I think it's like what you said about Kamala Harris and Walz promising things that they can't actually do, even though, you know, theoretically it is a popular thing that like people want, right? Like abortion is one example. And I've actually noticed a lot on like issues that other issues that they discuss at the debate, such as gun control, right? So I'm not sure if you guys watched that part, but there was a part about gun control where the two candidates actually agreed with each other a lot, right? But what Vance was saying was like, you know, we have a mental health crisis. That's the first thing that they said, that he said. So like, it's like we need to address the mental health crisis. And the second thing, he actually gave specific things that he wanted to do, which is, you know, provide more resources to schools to have more, you know, school resource police officers, right, to like make the school more secure, and if it's needed, right, like talk about increasing security. I'm not talking about like, you know, I'm not suggesting he wants everyone to like walk through a metal detector through the front door, but it's just, you know, you evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis, right? And if you're in a high-risk area, then maybe we should have a discussion about increasing security at schools and all this stuff, right? Because, you know, we're trying to do all that we can to prevent more school shootings and tragedies. And then what I felt, what Walz was saying was that he actually agreed with Vance on a lot of the things that he said. It's like, you know, mental health is important, and we need to like, you know, address these like crises with all these like mass shootings. But what Walz was saying is like, he started blaming like the gun lobby and started, you know, saying a lot of stuff that sounds flashy, but he, unlike Vance, he did not propose any specific things that he was going to do, right? So Vance said, we're going to look at the schools and possibly increase security in high-risk areas. We're going to implement more school resource officers. So those are specific actionable items, right? And a lot of people, especially left-leaning folks who are more, let's say, pro-gun control, they might look at what Walz is saying and it's like, oh, that's like, that sounds more flashy. I agree with Walz, and Vance wants to like, you know, pat down your child every time they go to school. That's not what he was suggesting, right? So I just think that my whole point is that I think a lot of the times that it's important that we ask our politicians, and I know we're Canadians, but let's just pretend we're Americans for a sec, but just Canada too, for that matter. But just ask our democratically elected politicians in general about specific policies of what they're going to do, and not just like be okay with slogans, which I think that, you know, I liked Vance a lot for that discussion on gun control when that part of the debate came. But anyways, that's like a whole separate spiel. But let me pass it to Tristan. Back to the kind of New York Times article. What did you think of this article headline? Do you think that it's biased? And what do you think of my response to it? Do you agree, disagree, or just what are your thoughts in general?
I think it's pretty obvious that the headline is biased. You can't write how one person tried to rewrite history while being unbiased. You can't just go in there and that's clearly editorialized, right? That's clearly an opinion. Someone else could have heard Vance say what he said and decide, oh no, that's what happened, right? But clearly the New York Times assessment of this was that this is what Vance was doing. So that anyone saying that this is, well, I'm not sure if anyone's claiming this is unbiased, but I think we're in agreement that this is biased. I think that the comment about Walz having a rocky start and then finding his voice on abortion, I think Walz was pretty consistent throughout it. I don't think he was rocky necessarily at the beginning. I feel like they were both relatively consistent. Walz just had a stronger, once they hit abortion, you hit the topic where the Democrats have pretty much the clearly almost universally agreed upon stance, right? Where there was going to be a lot of support for this topic. Well, everything prior to that, like the Israel war, etc., most people aren't making election decisions based on Israel. I'm sure some are, but most people aren't. That's not their top of their mind. It's very much like stuff at home. And for example, abortion would be something that's very top of mind, right? If you're a woman who wants to have the right to an abortion, even if they have no intention of ever using it, just wants that to be something that is available, might choose to vote for the Democrats purely based on that reason. Whereas I don't think many people are rolling out of bed and looking at the Israel war and being like, this is the top thing in my mind to decide my vote. So I think that's really where any real finding his feet or whatever it is, or found his voice, I guess it is. So I think it's a very weird take on that debate, because I don't think that this is necessarily an instance where a news report should be basically applying an opinion to this stance, because they're really kind of they're kind of hammering on Vance over like the fact checking and TV friendly style, like that feels like they're trying to say something about his presentation, and basically like it's like a veiled insult, right? Where it's like, like if you like, it's like if you threw a football and I was like, oh, I didn't expect you to throw that good. It's like there was an insult in that compliment, right? If you read between the lines. And I think that's very much what they're doing with the smooth JD Vance and the TV friendly style. So it's clear that they're kind of attacking Vance in this, but as more underhandedly, whereas they can pretend like it's not as biased, whereas the Wall stuff is kind of like much more positive, finding his voice, and he had a rocky start, but we all have rocky starts sometimes kind of vibe. And the oh shucks, it's just like it's very much it's very clear that there is a leaning towards the Democrats from this article.
And I really totally agree with you on that. And like, just to add to that, this is exactly how I felt during the Trump versus Harris debate. I know I said, like, during that debate, Harris did seem more eloquent, and I'm willing to admit that. But if you actually watch the Trump versus Harris debate hosted by ABC News, you could tell that ABC, like the hosts, were incredibly biased against Trump, right? So I don't know, like, if you just have to, I don't remember any specific questions, exactly how they worded it. But to me, it was just like whenever they asked Trump a question, especially like they had a whole section for like Jan 6, which, you know, that's just a section that's completely directed against Trump. Like I felt like just having a section like that is pretty unfair, because like we all know that that's going to be a stronger topic for the Democrats, right? But even besides that, there were instances in the debate between Trump and Harris where I felt they might as well just have been like, "Hey, Mr. Trump, why are you a terrible person?" Right? Like, how are you supposed to answer that question if the questions are that like pointed, right? Obviously, like they didn't ask that exact question, but I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but that's just how I felt. So yeah. Anyways, yeah. So no, you wanted to add something.
Just wanted to back up some of Tristan's points. I agree with a lot. Like Tristan just did like a analysis of the headline, and I agree with a lot of that. And just to add more to it, like in today's media environment, the news is told by headlines. Okay, so you have to like target audiences by the headline. And January 6th and abortion are very emotional. They're very emotional points that even a slight majority of Americans might agree with the Democrats on this. They're trying to target people's emotions, clearly. So I just, yeah, it was a very sneaky headline for sure. And I saw a lot of headlines like this actually in the news, but especially, but the New York Times has a special bias for sure.
Yeah, and actually, I forgot to add this to the docket, but I showed a few of you a picture. It was like Politico or somebody that had like a side-by-side a description of like how the debate went for Vance and for Walz. And then for Vance is like he wore a beard, and the beard signals like toxic masculinity and it's against feminist ideals. And then it showed a picture of Walz being like absolutely like shocked. And then it's like his eyes are wide, and it could be because of surprise, but it could also be because he's very emotionally attached and he's very passionate about the topic that he's talking about. So again, like that's an even more egregious. I'm gonna see if I can find that picture and then add it in post for our audience. But in my opinion, that was an even more egregious example of bias in the media. And like at that point, I feel like they're not even trying to hide it anymore, right? It's just I don't know who like actually falls for that, or how many people are actually, you know, find that convincing and find that believable. But I just think that like the fact that they're even trying that route and like are completely shameless about it, it's very concerning, right? Because it's like these little things when you have like a cabal of the media giants supporting one side over another, then that erodes democracy, right? So in order for democracy to work, sometimes there's good ideas from the left and sometimes there's good ideas from the right. But if you're only supportive of one side, I think that's when issues could arise. So yeah, I don't know if any of you wanted to add any comments on what I just said about the, you know, Vance versus Walz side by side and the beard thing, but
I do agree with you. I think if we're looking at the same picture here, it's more of like a Waltz versus a Vance like to the side, little beard on the side too. Yeah, everything checks out pretty much, and that's I guess the overall vibe. Yeah, like it's a good depiction of the entire debate. If you guys have a chance to watch it too, and yeah,
yeah,
that's
I
what I
mean,
think.
unfortunately, we don't have any women on this show, but like just out of everyone on the show, do you think that wearing a beard is a signal of anti-feminist ideals and toxic masculinity?
No, the beard.
I'm
Yeah.
a little biased on the issue, so I can't. Yeah, I don't know. I guess no is the answer for me, but I'm very biased on the issue. So
I hope not.
All right, on that bombshell, it's time to move on to our final story of the day, which is a little bit more political news, but is right here at home in Canada. And I know, Sunil, you're from Ottawa, right? So maybe this hits a little bit close to home with these, you know, Canadian politics being more and more front and center in the news right now. So what I'm sharing with our audience right now and what you guys see in front of you in the docket is a new poll, and I think this was, I forget who did it, Nanos or Main Street, or a poll that just came out that showed that out of the decided voters, so we removed the undecided voters, but out of the people that have decided who they're going to vote for if an election was held today, and right now it's early October of 2024. So out of all the people that have decided on which party they're going to vote for, you can see that, first of all, there's a large proportion of conservative support now. And the Liberals have been bleeding support for a long time. But what's perhaps more surprising than that is that the age group that is the most right-leaning is 18 to 29. And you're saying, like, no, it's not. Like, 45 to 59 has 47% support for the Conservatives, and 18 to 29 only has 43. Well, not so fast, because you're forgetting the People's Party, right? So the People's Party is a party started by Maxime Bernier, who's a former conservative, but he had a dispute with the Conservatives, and then he broke off, formed his own party, and the People's Party is generally seen as a more right-leaning party than even the Conservatives. And the People's Party among 18 to 29, age 18 to 29 in Canada, is actually, fairly high. It's greater than the Green Party. So they're at 7% support. So if you're adding up all the right-wing support in Canada by age group, the 18 to 29 age group is actually the greatest support among the right wing, right? It has the greatest support among the right wing. So, 50% exactly, right? So that's kind of the breakdown. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Canada is kind of unique in this, where if you go to any other Western democratic nation, whether it be the United States or Europe or just any Western nation, it's generally the younger people that are more left-leaning and the older people that are more right-leaning. But in Canada, we're starting to see the opposite, where if you see age 60 and over, actually there's 26% support for the Liberals still, right? So we see this kind of phenomenon in Canada where older people tend to be somehow more left-wing, more liberal than the younger people, which it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So my question to you guys is, of course, number one, why do you think this is happening? And what are the causes of it? And number two, maybe it's time to ask you guys, because I know I've already said my part, but I know a lot of you have said that you're still undecided. But are you ready to, since I think we're all in the 18 to 29 age group, maybe Sunil, you're I think you're a little bit older, right? Maybe you're not part of that group anymore, but out of the three of us, Tristan, Dom, and myself, we're in the 18 to 29 group. So we'll give the people of that demographic, the most right-leaning demographic, some time to explain why we're alt-right. So yeah, they're just kidding. Maybe some people will think we're alt-right, but anyways, why do you think this is happening? And have you decided on where your political allegiance stands if an election was held today?
Oh gosh, okay, fine, I'll go first. People are just fed up with JT. I think we can't stress that enough. In the past few podcast episodes where we talk about Canadian politics specifically, I think nowadays they're trying to crack down on immigration, which is I guess somewhat of a prevalent thing, but I think it's sort of like a too late, too little kind of business, as mentioned in other podcast episodes before. And yeah, I think the natural thing is always younger people votes Liberal because to us, well, I'm on the cusp of getting older, but we care about people's rights and values and things like this. And I think on a more general basis, the older you get, you care more about money and other things like this and less about people's values and rights. But I think simply because of the fact that the leader up above in Ottawa, next to Sunil there, is not doing the best of jobs, and he could do a little better. So I think people are just simply fed up, and then it is what it is. On a side note, My final verdict for the election, I wish it was this year, but it's next year, is oh no, I'm blacking. No, I'm kidding. I'm not gonna tell you guys. Um, I'll just say I'm undecided as of right now. But let's just say in 2025 I will come out with the final decision. But yeah, I am backing out. I'm not. I'm pleading the fifth. I know we're in Canada, but still, I'll leave it at that.
Regarding us young folks becoming so right leaning, I think that it's kind of misleading actually, because I think we have to remember that the conservatives in Canada are not as far right as like the Republicans in the States. So the conservatives in Canada, it's not necessarily like it's not nearly as much of a difference as if everyone in Canada like are in that age group was leaning more towards the Republicans over the Democrats. It's like a much bigger move politically, whereas in Canada the difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives is not as big. And I think that there's probably a reasonable argument that the Liberals have been moving a little bit more towards the left, which could mean that people are more aligned with the Conservatives over the Liberals now, because the Liberals have gone too far to the one side, whereas before maybe you would agree with 60% of the Liberals and 40% of the Conservatives. But now that the Liberals have moved to the left, now you only agree with 30%, and you still agree with that 60%ish, 40% of the Conservatives. And now there's kind of this empty spot in the middle of on all these issues where you don't really have a party to consider that would have a middle position on them. So I think that's part of it. I think the only real thing though with the young people here is I feel like it is a little misleading to say that we're significantly more right, like in the most right leaning demographic, because I think that really depends on what you consider the Bloc, because the Bloc Québécois generally is on the more right side of the political spectrum. And if you add on our Bloc number compared to the 45 to 59, we are lower than them again, just saying. So and if you include the Bloc on any of that, I think we actually get overtaken. So I think it's actually the most interesting thing on here is the PPC support, because that is significantly higher by the young folks compared to the older folks. And I think that may be more of a sign of people becoming more right-leaning, the younger folks becoming more right-leaning than the conservative side, because I really think the conservative side is also just a big factor of that is I think people are very sick of Justin Trudeau. And so your alternative to Trudeau is the guy who's been backing up Trudeau this whole time, basically for the last like several years, or the Conservatives. You basically don't have another option. Yeah, if you're in Quebec, you can vote for the Bloc. If you're, really feeling like throwing your vote away today, you can vote for the Green Party or the PPC. But the Conservatives are the only real alternative to the Liberals here. And so I'd say that a lot of people have just flipped. They've gone, well, the Liberals did a bad job the last little bit. Things are worse now than they were. Time to vote for the other guys, because it's essentially a two-party system. And your option is, do you want the blue garbage or the red garbage? Because both of them have problems. They have different problems. Which one is least problematic right now? And I think it's very clear that everyone is collectively agreed almost that the Conservatives are currently looking like the least garbage of the options. that being said,
So from what I'm hearing is that you're going to choose blue in the next.
my vote will we'll see. We'll see. There's still plenty of time. I don't need to outwardly say my vote on any of these. You know, who knows? Maybe I'll vote for the bloc. Move to Quebec. Vote for the bloc. Peace out, Canada.
Oh, fair. I believe maybe we'll get our first endorsement of a party tonight with Zillennial speak. So I'll pass it to him.
Well, I actually, this is just an issue I generally have thought about a lot lately. I've always been like kind of addicted and passionate about politics. I used to work in politics, actually. I worked for the NDP during the Gaslighting campaign, just for a brief period of time. And so, I mean, you can cut me off, Andy, when you think I'm going too far or if I'm going too long, but I did have a few things to say here that I thought were important. First of all, I actually agree with Dominic and Tristan that there's a cyclicality aspect to this. People are sick of Justin Trudeau. Like, so yeah, there is an aspect of this, they're just going for the Conservatives because where else are they going to go? I also agree that the Conservatives are more palatable to progressives in Canada versus what you see in the United States. It's not as divided. I disagree that the Bloc is a right-wing party. I consider the Bloc a left-wing party. I remember meeting a lot of Bloc staffers when I worked in politics, and they're very pro-socialist. Quebec has a very long socialist history, and the Bloc has actually always been supportive of the unions and stuff like that. But that's a side point. That's not really important here. I think that there's a lot of things happening in the economy that are actually impacting young people in a very different manner. Inflation, housing costs, which are keeping young people, especially Gen Z and younger millennials, out of the housing market. But I think that a big factor is that people are losing faith in institutions at a very, very rapid rate. And from the perspective of an older millennial, I'm 40 years old. I was born in 1984. I will say that millennials growing up in the 90s, like got to see the world, but got to see the institutions performing very well. I don't know if you guys remember the 90s, but I grew up in the 90s. I grew up under Jean Chrétien, and man, was Canada a wicked country back then. We were scoring #1 country to live in the HDI index and all this other stuff. And millennials also saw like the slow decline of the institutions, and a lot of young millennials never even got to see the institutions functioning properly. Now you get to Gen Z. Gen Z never saw any proper functioning institutions. So I think that's having a major effect on people's views politically, because the Liberals very much are the institutionalist party of Canada. The Liberals, if you go back to Mackenzie King, the World War II era, you go back to Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and if you go back to the Chrétien era, the Liberals are the only party in Canada that have had 3-4 consecutive terms in office federally, which means that they've had a major impact on Canada's institutions, and they're basically have positioned themselves as the party that's going to protect and bail out Canada's institutions, including our media, including things like the CBC, which also I would argue has given them more positive coverage in the media. But my point here is I think that like there's parallels here in Canada what happened in places like Argentina, where you see a one party, the Peronists, control the institutions for 50 years, and then you see young people just completely reject the institutionalist party all at once. So I do think that there's an element of that going on. I have a few other things to say, but that's kind of my overall point. As somebody who is basically a former socialist, I've just lost faith in the leftist political parties. I've lost faith in the institutions, and I'm going to vote for Pierre Poilievre. So I'll go out there and I'll mark myself as a conservative supporter. And I'm not traditionally a conservative person.
Yeah, no, I think what you just said is the exact kind of same as my like kind of political voting record, right? I'm a little bit younger than you, right? So I'm 28 this year, about to turn 29 in December. But yeah, I mean, I haven't actually voted in that many federal elections, right? So I'll just, before people try to paint me as some sort of, family generational right winger and stuff, I've actually never voted for the conservatives on a federal level in my life. Like, can you guys believe that? Right? In 2019, I voted for Trudeau. And when Trudeau called the election in 2021, I did not want to vote for him again because, in my opinion, that was a blatant power grab. All right. But I didn't want to vote for the conservatives as well. Right. So I voted for NDP in 2021, which I know might come as a shocker to a lot of people. But listen, like, in my opinion, like, the conservatives also didn't put up great candidates in 2019 and 2021, right? So it's Andrew Scheer versus Aaron O'Toole. So I just think that, these two individuals, nothing against them, but they just weren't very charismatic people, let's just say, right? So I think it's part of the fault. I blame the conservatives as well for not putting up great candidates. But yeah, for this, like, the next coming election, whether it be the end of this year, early next year, or by the latest in October of next year, I will be voting for Pierre Poilievre, because I agree with what y'all just said. It is time for a change, right? But I just wanted to preface that by saying that, like, don't like name me as a generational, like, always right wing kind of guy, because that's not who I am, right? So I think my opinions have maybe changed a little throughout the years, but I think it's not without reason. So that's that part. As to why I think this is happening, where like, younger people especially are more right leaning, I think you guys touched upon it. Is all has to do with housing price. I think that's the major driving factor, right? Or just cost of living in general. We have some of the older people who have enjoyed the benefits of the appreciating real estate in Canada, which, by the way, has gone up way more than other G7 countries, just, relatively speaking. And if you look at it compared to the average or to the median income in Canada, housing prices like the worst in the G7. And that's just a piece of statistic that you can look up that's objectively true, right? So older people tend to, like, they've had more time to build up wealth because a lot of people bought a house before the big inflation really kicked in. So they've enjoyed the benefits of inflation, whereas the younger people have not. So I just think that that's just plain and simple the driving factor. And it's really unfortunate that our government, whether it be like liberal and conservative, right? So, like, the last 9 years is where the majority of the inflation happens. So I do place most of the blame on the liberal government, but not to bring it always back to Bitcoin, but inflation is kind of like a feature of the fiat system. So I think it's just the system as a whole that's already inflationary, that's designed to extract wealth from the populace for the benefit of the rich and the elites. But this was super, like, exacerbated under the Trudeau administration over the past 9 years. And it's unfortunate that, I didn't really see it because I was young and I didn't really understand all this stuff back in 2019. This was before I became a Bitcoiner, right? But yeah, that's a mistake that I would not be making again, let's just say. So somebody raised their hand earlier. I forgot who, but whoever raised their hand, you can take the floor.
That was me. I just wanted to say I do stand corrected. The block is left. I am just not familiar enough with them. For some reason, I thought they were right-leaning. Apparently, they're not. Learn something new.
I had another comment about, like, the People's Party, actually.
Sure.
If I was to guess, I think it's because of mass immigration and how much young people have lost opportunities and having to compete in the job market with, a new stock of Canadians that are much more price competitive in the job market. You're hearing about a lot of young people too that can't find summer jobs because they can't even find retail jobs. I put myself through half my education with my retail jobs and my factory jobs that I was able to get when I was younger. I couldn't imagine what I would do right now if I couldn't even find a summer job. And that probably has something to do with the rising young person support for the People's Party.
It's also the fact that I think it's been pretty clear that immigration has been really high for a significant amount of the last few years, and that has been directly correlated with the increase in housing costs. So if you're a young person and you're trying to afford rent, you can't get a job, you can't get a house that you can rent because it's too damn expensive. And what are you supposed to do, right? You can't you can't get a job, you can't. And I think a lot of people, instead of kind of looking at it from the more how do I solve this problem perspective, they blame the immigrants over the people who did such a poor job of managing immigration, which is something that is crucial to our country, particularly as one of the largest countries in the world with one of the smallest populations. There is no shortage of space for immigrants. It's just that you can't bring in a ton of people without having jobs and houses for them. And it seems like the government just kind of forgot about that fact and just brought in everyone. And there's been a big pushback from the younger people who are now having to compete with so many more people, which is, I think, kind of a more long-winded piece about your Sunil's point on the PPC growth.
Andy mentioned it briefly, but Pierre Poilievre is much more formidable candidate than the Canadian media is giving him credit. I think he's articulate. He's a good talker. He's good in front of the media. He's good at attacking the media when the media attacks him. There's been a few instances, like recently the CTV story where they misquoted him. They cut him off mid-sentence and quoted that. There's been a few more instances of that, and I just think that Pierre Poilievre is way more formidable than anybody expected him to be. I also think there's other issues in Canada, like creeping censorship that young people aren't going to necessarily be for, and attacking online platforms. Like they with Facebook had to remove their news. Like, this is how young people get their news. Young people don't go to the CBC. They don't watch the CTV or anything like that. And then the other thing is that taxes are high and the services are not good. Like, we're paying high. We're all finally coming into a part of our life where we're starting to make money. We're starting to have to pay taxes, and our services are declining. It's not a good combination.
Axing the carbon tax is only a start, right?
I was going to say that. I was about to say axe the tax. No,
okay, so here's what I don't understand, Dom. You seem to be very pro one side every time you take up the mic. However, you're still supposedly an undecided voter. So maybe deep down inside, that means that there's still a chance. Like Trudeau's so you're telling me there's a chance, right? There's still a chance in your heart for Trudeau to redeem himself, is what I'm getting at. So we talked about this last episode, but is there anything that whether it be Trudeau or Jagmeet Singh from the NDP, are there anything that these two gentlemen can do to win your trust back?
I think just historically, probably not. And the reason as to why I'm not publicly announcing my endorsements is just simply because I'm a contract worker, okay? I don't even have full-time position work. So I'm trying to, if I get a job interview, I want to nail a job at least. So if I publicly announce my position in a political system, I got to make sure, I just don't want to reveal everything quite yet, So at the end of the story, that's pretty much why.
Oh, fair. You're I don't want to endorse anyone, but axe attacks. Yeah.
What do you guys think the conservatives are doing well?
Why do I think the conservatives are doing well?
What do you guys think they're doing well to attract young voters?
I think focusing on the economic message is definitely the way to go, right? Because it is the thing that the people right now are the most concerned about, right? So I've seen a lot of polls where the economy of Canada ranks number one in the list of concerns. And yeah, I think it's for a good reason, right? Whether it be because of immigration, whether it be because of just like, you know, all this high taxes driving people away. We could like make an argument for a lot of these different factors as to what caused it, but I think what the conservatives are saying is generally on the correct path, and what a lot of people kind of agree with needs to be done to fix the economy in Canada, right? So first of all, we need to get rid of these like stupid carbon tax and this tax and that tax, right? So by the way, I'm saying this 24 hours or less than 24 hours before I'm going to get the carbon rebate, which I'm not sure if you guys know, the next carbon rebate check comes out tomorrow. So yeah, before you guys like, you know, accuse me of being like alt-right, you know, right-wing, super conservative, like I'm going to get the carbon rebate check, but that's not enough for me to like be pro the carbon tax, because that doesn't change how stupid it is, right? So like think about it this way: we're punishing people essentially, right? Like they might not sell it that way, but we're punishing people for consumption, right? So what uses carbon? Everything uses carbon, right? You need to drive to the grocery store, you need to put gas in your car, that's carbon, right? You need to eat, right? Like the food needs carbon to be produced, like the food needed to like be driven to the grocery store with diesel trucks, right? You need to heat your home during the winter. Everything is like uses carbon, and we're punishing people. And like, you know, the liberals are trying to sell it by saying we're only punishing the corporations, we're taxing the corporations and giving the money to you. Well, what happens when you make businesses less affordable, where they're running these like, you know, logistics business or grocery business that's already razor thin margins? They're just going to raise the price, right? So what you're like, I think Pierre Polyev was saying how the carbon tax is causing like 60 cents more, like 60 cents per liter in gasoline costs, like where they just, and they're raising it every year, right? So I'm not sure exactly how, like where he got that number or how accurate it is, but it's like, it's no doubt going to drive up the cost of gasoline, right? Because there's no way that it wouldn't. So if you just got rid of the carbon tax, I don't need this check, and this check is $100 anyway, so it's pretty useless, like in general, right? Because $100 doesn't buy you that much anymore. It's 100 Canadian moose shekels, not even 100 US dollars, right? So it doesn't buy you anything anyway. So I would rather you lower my taxes, even if it means I don't get this check tomorrow. But like I'm being forced this check, right? So like if you give me a like this carbon rebate, I'm not gonna like not take it, but I would much rather you just get rid of this whole program and lower the taxes in the first place, right? Like what's the point of taxing people, taking half of it and then giving the other half back to the people, right? Like this is essentially what the liberals are doing. That's dumb. Like, and of course we can talk about the online censorship bills, but like I don't want this show to run for too long, but let me just give you guys an opportunity to respond to the carbon tax, since we're on this topic already.
I'll go really quick, Tristan, and then I'll like give it your way. I just like Pierre's whole, you know, axe to tax, fix the budget, and common sense approach. I think it really speaks to a lot of Canadians, and with JT's historical like downfalls, like the trucker situation and like this immigration whole situation, the cost of living, housing, it's not really helping his case. And it seems like with Pierre's demure, or sorry, I used the word again, but like, you know, the quintessential, like he's talking to an interviewer and then he's eating the apple and then he's answering all the questions and basically destroying the interviewer. I think right then and there is just showing how much of a capable leader he is versus JT with the historical, you know, history of not doing so well for us Canadians. I think damn, I'm speaking my mind too much, but pretty much, yeah, I think that's why most Canadians are going the conservative route. I do like the whole axe attacks, fix the budget, common sense, everyday Canadian shenanigans, let's say. So, all right, Tristan, next, you're up next.
The crime too. That's another one that we could talk about. But yeah, the intro, by the way, is just going to be Dominic saying demure like 50 times over.
Whatever gets the views, sure.
Tristan.
Pierre is really hammering on the things that people care about. And I think big ones are housing and cost of living. And I think the carbon tax represents an obvious area where cost of living has been increased because of it. And, I know people will be like, but the rebate, my heating bill, I can see how much of it is the carbon tax. It says it right there. And believe me, I am not getting enough back in this rebate to cover all the expenses, assuming that there's any impact on anything else. So from that perspective, it's like it doesn't really pass the sniff test. If I'm looking at my utility bill and I'm paying, $100 in carbon tax every month in the winter, and I'm going just on my heating bill, and I'm going, my house isn't even that hot. So, and then I get, like $200, $300 or $100, and I don't know how much the rebate is back. And it's just like, is this really worth it? Is this really helping me? And it really doesn't feel like it. So I think that there's been a clear increase in the cost of living. And I think that there is an obvious increase in housing price, where such to the point where I think that most people are kind of just looking at, young people particularly, are looking at the housing scenario and going, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. And I think, I had that revelation upon graduating university and realizing that, if I stayed in Ontario, the likelihood that I would ever be able to buy a house was basically next to none. And that was one of the main reasons that inspired my move to Alberta, was the fact that I could buy a house and live my life instead of paying rent for some broom closet in Toronto or something. So I think that he's really hammering on these big points that people really care about. And I think that that's what is really speaking to people, is because the young people are the ones who are really most affected by the increase in housing costs, because they're the ones least capable to buy a house. They're the ones who are watching houses go up more than their salary goes up. So, and by that, I don't mean just like percentage wise. I mean, like, you can literally be like, I get paid $50,000 and the house that I want to buy just went up $50,000 in value every year, kind of vibe. So it's just like, it's just, there's been a lot of problems that have come up in Canada, and Pierre's really hammering on them, I think.
Yeah, and like the budget deficit, I would argue, like government spending exploding the public sector is a big contributor to, inflation and housing price going up and all this stuff, right? So I know, like, let me just preempt this, and then I'll pass it off to someone else. But like, I know we're gonna probably get one or two comments from, liberal supporters being like, hey, you guys just like said a bunch of things like about why the conservatives are better than the liberals, and it's like, but what are the conservatives actually going to do, right? Like, what are some examples of policies that they're going to implement? Well, my response to that is that at this point, like, the liberal administration under Trudeau has been so bad at managing the country that I would vote for anyone just to repeal the current policies that they're implementing. And that's all you need to do to get my vote. Like, that's literally the point that I'm at, that like, people criticize Pierre like for saying slogans, right? Like, all he does is just yell slogans. Like, that's fine. Like, as long as he like actually follows through in the part where he says he'll repeal the stupid stuff that Trudeau has done, you have my vote. Like, that's all I have to say. As to like, actually trying to like fix the issue long term once and for all, like, we'll see, right? Like, I'm not like loyal to any party or any politician in specifically, but there's a chance that the conservatives under Pierre will suck too. Like, I understand that risk, right? But yeah, at this point, I'm just willing to give anyone a shot that actually promises to repeal, like, stuff like the carbon tax, the, balance the budget, stop the crime, and just like fix all these things that are broken. So Sunil, let me pass it off to you.
Yeah, I had a few things to say, just a few things to say, but the Apple moment was brilliant. It really showcased Pierre Poilievre's charisma. It like went viral internationally. Like I had people from other countries sending me messages about it.
Summarize the Apple moment, just in case there's people that haven't seen the video.
This is just a great moment. You can watch it on YouTube. Pierre Poilievre is being asked questions, which I guess are suggesting that he's like alt-right or like a really hardcore, like, like people call people neo-Nazis and stuff. So I think the journalist is making suggestions that Pierre Poilievre, like some of the language or some of the words he uses is like alt-right. And Pierre then just simply asks him like, how so? Explain to me how I've been extremist. Explain to me how my rhetoric is concerning. And the journalist had nothing to say. And it was just like a shocking, it was a moment that really showcased the media bias, and Pierre just like destroyed him like so easily. And do you know what it reminded me of? Do you know who it reminded me of? It reminded me of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Because Pierre Elliott Trudeau was somebody who had this ability to connect with people with wit. Like, and he was really fast on his feet. Like, you see, I don't know if you've ever seen the video of Pierre Elliott Trudeau being questioned about the War Measures Act in front of Parliament back in like 1977. It was a brilliant, whether you agree with it or not, it was a brilliant political moment. And Pierre had a brilliant political moment there. So I just thought that showcased a lot of how formidable of a candidate he is, especially compared to the last few conservative leaders. And then the other thing is the common sense approach is just resonating with Canadians. It just works, and he's not overcomplicated anything. He's just focusing on the issues people care about. And the other factor is gaslighting. Like, the Liberals have been gaslighting the hell out of us, whether it's about the carbon tax, whether it's about the deficit, whether it's about there's a few things I wrote down, immigration, like Chrystia Freeland, the way she gaslights and telling people you should just like get rid of your Disney subscription plan if you want to save money, and just they're just not the Liberals have no real answers to anything. Oh, the carbon tax, don't worry about it. Like, you're getting a rebate. It's like, what the hell is the point of taxing us if you're giving us a rebate in the first place? First of all. Secondly, like, come on, we can see how much the carbon tax is on our electricity bill and on our gas bill. Don't gaslight us. And what are you doing raising taxes on the poor? Because when you raise taxes on home heating bills, you're impacting the poor more than anybody. So like, that just goes against left-wing doctrine. So I don't know what the Liberals were thinking with the carbon tax. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And then the last thing I'll say is that the Liberals, when you're a party in power, it is your responsibility to have national conversations when you do big things, such as increasing immigration by 1.5 million in a single year. Like, that is illiberal. That is a liberal democracy if you're not going to have a national conversation with your citizens about that. Canada has exhausted our point system at like 400,000 immigrants per year. And instead of like communicating with us and saying, we believe we need more immigrants temporarily, they said nothing. And they just let all these students in, and they all these they allowed people to make refugee claims. If you look at some of the data on the refugee claims, a lot of it's coming from places like India rather than like actual war-torn regions. So I just think we've been gaslit, and I think that the Liberals have become illiberal, and it's concerning. And Canadians are sick of it, and they're just there is an element where Pierre is just the right place, the right time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw an earlier episode where we actually talked about is when they were having the Liberal retreat in Nanaimo, where somebody asked the foreign minister Melanie Joly like a poll that came out that said that the majority of like Canadians don't like the Liberals anymore, and what's the prospects for an early election. And she straight up told the room full of reporters that Canadians don't want an election right now. They just want the Liberals to govern. And like, I don't know like what planet she's on, like, because she's she's not in the same country, and she's not even on the same planet as the rest of us. So that's example number one. And then we talked about that in a previous episode. And I think another moment was just happened earlier this week during question period, where Trudeau claimed that the carbon tax helps make the Canadian economy stronger by having this carbon tax, which it's a bizarre claim, to say the least. So like, if you just use any logic, right? Like, if you just try and go down this logic pathway, that this idea that having a carbon tax makes your economy stronger, well then, if we 10x the carbon tax, does that make our economy like 10x stronger than what it is like right now, right? Or the benefit of the carbon tax, however, like, let's say having this carbon tax right now gives us 1% extra GDP growth per year. Let's just say, right? Then if we 10x the carbon tax, then do we get 10% more GDP growth like per year? Like, then that means we should maybe 100x the carbon tax. Then we can double our GDP every year, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. And the fact that he's even trying to claim this in Parliament in front of all our elected politicians, which are supposed to be like, you know, the best and the brightest and the smartest people that have the best ideas on how to govern the country and the most responsible, the adults in the room, right? Like, that's another phrase that the Liberals like to use, that they're the adults in the room, and Pierre likes to shout slogans like he's 6 years old. Well, the adults in the room think that taxing people makes your economy stronger. This is just like two examples that I've seen recently of how the Liberals are trying to gaslight Canadians, and yeah, like, totally agree with what you said, Sunil.
There's also the corporate welfare. Like last week, they gave a $2 billion loan to Telestat, which has a market cap of like $400 million. It doesn't even make mathematical sense. You're giving a loan to a company that's bigger than their market cap. And then their explanation was just like, oh yeah, like, we need competition. It's like, competition, like, this is just corporate welfare, it's crony capitalism, and you just gaslight this. That's just another example that just like hit me hard last week, where I was speechless. I had nothing, like, I couldn't even believe that they were actually trying to make that argument.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the majority shareholder in Telesat is an American person or American company, right? So like, they're trying to play it off as like being more patriotic because, like, you know, we don't want to use Starlink because it's owned by the alt-right fascist Elon Musk, right? We want to use like something that's like right at home. Well, like, it's like partly owned by, it's at least part, I don't know if it's majority owned, but it's at least like a significant chunk of it was later found out to be owned by like an American individual or American company. So
yeah, and then like, meanwhile, they're saying we're trying to solve rural broadband internet. It's like, Elon solved it. You go to Costco, you buy a Starlink, and you plug it in. Like, you can figure it out in 15 minutes. Well, maybe like the drive is another 15 minutes, but go to Costco, buy a Starlink. You don't need government to be bailing out dying internet companies. Like, we don't have like, who's gonna launch Telestat's rockets?
Okay, Elon Musk is going to be launching their rockets. How does their business make any sense if he needs Elon to launch the rockets for them? That's just, yeah. The state of politics in Canada is just.
Anyways, does anyone else have anything to add before we wrap up? We have gone on for a long time, so maybe some final comments before we end the show.
Yeah, I just really wanted to bring up how, since we were on the topic kind of how the Liberals are being cringe, the one Liberal MP, Mark Holland, when he was like, your road trips be killing the planet, man. And I was just like, do you not understand that road trips is a very economical, fun way for people to have a vacation that helps the country, because they go usually to someplace in Canada and spend their money in Canada instead of hopping on an airplane and flying to somewhere else. Like, this is literally smooth brain to your thought process here with this road trips are killing the planet. I was just like,
how did that like this? What staff that wrote that? Like, who told him to say that?
Well, that's the scary part. I don't think a staffer wrote that. I think he actually believes that, and he's not just a regular MP. He's the health minister. So he's literally the guy that's in charge of like health in Canada from the federal level. And I know like the majority of healthcare responsibilities are delegated to provinces, but like seeing that we have a health minister, I'm sure that he has a lot of power and a lot of responsibility. And this is like the logic pathway that our health minister decides to take, that we need to like, go cancel our road trips because, the planet is burning and we're not doing enough to combat climate change. And it's like, look, Canada has a small population on the global stage. So even if we all died tomorrow, like that's not gonna really do anything to change like the whole like climate change, right? Because China is like pumping millions and billions of metric tons of CO2, and the United States is trying to go more green, but like they have like 10x our population, right? So they're pumping a lot more carbon into the atmosphere than we could ever do. So like I think the whole climate change thing, I think, is another thing that we should have a conversation with. It's not that like we don't want to do anything about it, but it's also that like, look, as Canada, there's a limited amount of stuff that we can or should do because like, again, we have 40 million people in this country, right? And it's also the hypocrisy. It's like, look at how many vacations that Trudeau has taken in his private jet, right? I'm sure like Mark Holland has taken a lot of vacations with his family as well. And I'm not gonna like berate him for taking a vacation because I think that everybody should take a vacation from time to time, right? But it's just like rules for thee and not for me, right? Like you might have to sacrifice your road trip, but that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make, right? Like this is what it came off as. So yeah, that's just my opinion. What did you say?
They also bought a pipeline. Like
yeah,
they saved a pipeline project. I mean, I maybe there's sometimes justification for supporting fossil fuels as a left-wing government, but like it's just so hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. Like I'm actually pro like, fossil fuels and using more of it just because I think, especially right now with our economy kind of down in the dumps, I think that is a great way to like get more money in the hands of everyday people. Of course, like I'm not for polluting the environment, right? We should try and do it in the most environmentally responsible way possible. But yeah, it's just like it's pretty clear that the liberals are just opportunists, right? Like it's okay if I support this pipeline and this, fossil fuel project, but it's not okay if, like Pierre wants to repeal the carbon tax and like, saying that it's okay for you to go on a 10-hour road trip. So yeah, anyways, does anyone else have anything to add before we wrap up? Nope. Okay, great. So let me pass it to Dom, our resident outro guy, for the outro.
Sorry,
Sure,
Dom.
no
I just wanted to say one thing. Thank you for having me on, guys. It was a fun time.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, no worries at all. Thanks for coming along. And I was just gonna put the cherry on the top after all this talk. There's still no railway from Windsor to Quebec City, and I don't know why, but heck, that's another conversation for another time. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, as well as our clips channel too as well. Peace out.
I think I already said it, but I appreciate you guys having me on, and it was good talking to you guys, and it's nice to learn from you guys. And I love watching your show. You guys are like the Canadian All In. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we'll have you on again next week if you're available. So yeah, we'll see. Great show tonight. Let's wrap it up here. Have a great one, guys.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.